I would like to start with getting some context on how you got into cryptocurrency and got to eventually start Panvala.
Sounds good. So I guess my journey into like blockchain tech in general, like I heard about Bitcoin a couple times. I thought it was a silly thing where nerds thought they could make money from nothing. Then one of my friends, like, he's like, "Hey, have you read about this Bitcoin thing?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I think it's silly, but I guess if you're asking me about it, I'll read more about it." So then I spent the next week or so of my life going down the rabbit hole, and then realized that nerds could make money from nothing. And I kind of started learning more about Bitcoin that way. A couple years later, I heard about some people who were trying to put a programming language in their money to make it worth more somehow. And I'm like, oh, that's a scam coin. That's a scam coin. And that was Ethereum. It turns out that having a programming language in your money is a very good idea. If your money does not have a programming language in it, you probably want to replace that with some money that does. But it wasn't clear to me at the time. And what made it really quick was actually using Ethereum. So I was interested in prediction markets at the time, basically markets where you can bet on future events like elections, and then it would give you a forecast of how likely that outcome actually is. So there's a team working on Augur, which is a prediction market platform, that happened to be using Ethereum as the back end of their system. And by contributing to that project, because I was excited about prediction markets, that's what made me actually interact with Ethereum for the first time. And that's what made it really click. Like, it's not just about having a programming language in your money. It's about being able to write the rules of any interactions between individuals or groups of people. And if you come up with some new way for people to cooperate, if people like cooperating in that way, then they can do that forever without needing any intermediary. They don't need to rely on anybody else. You've written down the rules, and those rules are being enforced by the Ethereum network, like they're the game master of some grand game you're playing. So basically, for anyone who thinks there's a better way for us to be cooperating as people, as a society, if you can come up with that better way, write down those rules in a smart contract, have the Ethereum network enforce those rules, then people can just opt into your new way, and you can make the world better in that sort of way. So that's when I quit my job and realized like I have to work on this full time. Came across Consensus and started working there. At Consensus, I did some security auditing work, some more work on different prediction market stuff. But the idea that I couldn't get out of my head is that if this is truly a toolkit for economic and social coordination, then like you could probably use it to solve the biggest problems that we have. And to me, the biggest problem is like how do we coordinate to produce the things that we share, the things that we all depend on, the things that we all enjoy together. Those are the things that tend to be hard to produce. The things that benefit one person, like the phones in our pockets, those are easy to coordinate to produce. The person who gets the phone is going to pay for it. And then if you build a better phone, then people will buy your better phone instead of the competing phone. So they get better at a rapid rate. But when you look outside at the things that we all share, those things are getting better as fast as the phones in our pocket are getting better. I don't think that's a flaw in human nature. I don't think there's some sort of technological limitation there. I think it's just the way we organize ourselves. We haven't figured out how to apply the rapidly improving mechanisms of markets to the things that we share. So if you can come up with a way to do that, I think you can make the world a lot better. So I was trying to come up with these different ways. Like at the time, I was thinking of them as decentralized nonprofits and kind of putting together prototypes of those. Panvala itself ends up being actually the third in that series of experiments. And that's what I started working on it in 2018. We built up a team and we launched it on Ethereum mainnet in 2019. And that's really the story of how we started putting together this network of communities that work together to drive resources to every network, to every community in the network.
Nice. I like what you're saying about shared resources. Also, public goods is kind of just another word for that. But I feel like the system of capitalism came about so successfully because no one needed to write the rules for that. That once people decided that something like gold had value that was measurable, then no one needed to tell people how to transact gold for services. And so we like kind of stumbled into this really beautiful system of capitalism that no one had to think of. people just kind of thought about it after the fact and said, oh yeah, this kind of works out pretty well. But it never did work for public goods. And that's exciting to me that cryptocurrency lets us write those types of rules where we can suddenly make the economic system work for things that it hasn't worked for. I think that's a super compelling thing to be working on. And
yeah, absolutely. I think it's actually helpful to think of capitalism as something that did have to be designed, because like what you're talking about, like using like people exchanging goods and services with one another. You're right, that didn't necessarily have to be designed. But like if you think of land, if you think of corporations, if you think of all these different assets that our modern economic system relies on, those things did have to be designed. To scale up from a mercantile society to modern capitalism required design. And the choices were made that have a big effect on the world that we live in today. And I think by understanding the process by which capitalism emerged, we can actually do something similar that makes capitalism better, that makes it more pro-social, that every time we find something that capitalism seems to have ignored and maybe stamped out in some sort of way, we can find ways to restore that by taking cues from the way capitalism emerged and trying to deploy it in a way that we designed to achieve our own ends.
what are some good examples of decisions that we made that backfired, you think?
Great question. So we're going to go down the rabbit hole now, but the biggest thing is what's called the enclosure movement. That really is where both the modern notions of private property and land came about. So again, I'm not a historian, so this is going to be very rough. But basically, if you think of before capitalism, you had more or less a feudal order in Europe, where when it came to like controlling land, you had the king, strongest guy in that area, who gave the people who contributed strength to his army, or maybe money or whatever else, gave them control over a piece of land to use for their own benefit. So land wasn't something that you bought. It was something that the king said, this is yours. And if you wronged the king would say, this is not yours. This is somebody else's now. But to make that system stable, like it wasn't just the king doing whatever he wanted to do. There were actually rules that the upper classes in those areas came up with to constrain what the king could do, to set expectations for how the system works. So maybe the king can't just say this land isn't yours anymore in certain areas, or maybe there's some sort of process, etc. But the most important rule in the context of private property is the obligations of a land owner to the people who are basically the serfs, the people who don't own land of their own and who are using that land. There were obligations. It wasn't just a pure like you just charge them whatever rent you want and that's how it goes. It's like, hey, there's some commitment that the people serving you do to gain access to your land, but you also have to give them things like common property for them to be able to use. Like common property was a feature of the feudal order in Europe, and that common property is actually where modern notions of private property emerged from, because what people found out at a certain point was that the benefits you could get from having someone serve you and use the common land that was required to provide from you, those benefits were less than enclosing that private land, putting a fence around it, and saying, hey, I'm going to raise some sheep on this land and just sell those sheep on the open market, their wool, etc. I'm going to raise some sheep on that land and sell. So if they could get more benefits from doing that, then they had this urge, this natural motivation to go make this order legal. Like if the laws say that we have to give these people access to this common land, but that's actually not the most profitable thing to do, maybe we can just petition our governments to change those rules. And that's what the enclosure movement was. It was saying, hey, let's change the laws in all these countries to allow for the enclosure of private property that could then be sold market as an asset rather than something that was just the king says you control. That is really, that enclosure is really the process of common property becoming private property. And it did not have to be that way. That's not the only way to organize a system, but that's what people found. That's where people who are looking out for their self-interest They said, hey, this is the best move to play now, so let's play this move. And, for better or for worse, it worked in a lot of economic ways. Like the most productive places tended to be the places with strong private property rights, but perhaps not optimally so, as you can see in a lot of ways that was played out over. Like maybe it works very well in a expanding society that where not all the land is really accounted for or settled, et cetera. But if you think of modern Western nations where life in urban areas has become very hard to live because everything's gotten so expensive, maybe just encouraging people to bottle up as much of the wealth from land as possible, put it in their own pockets, rather than providing it for the community that creates that wealth in the first place. Maybe that's not the optimal way to go. But if we're in this, like the rules that have evolved over time are so hard to change because everyone has their own interests baked into different pieces of property, that like you can end up in a suboptimal like situation that you're kind of trapped in, where getting people out of it requires some sort of massive change that nobody wants to do it. But nobody can even see how it can be better because from an individual standpoint, everyone is better off in the current system with the current property. So again, the system that we have is the system that we have. It's just that if we realize that it was designed, it's easier to see how it's not necessarily optimal, though it is better than a lot of things people have tried. Keep it in mind that the 20th century was a time of lots of social experiments that went wrong in very catastrophic ways. It's not, the system that we have is not terrible. It's better than a lot of alternatives, but we can probably do better.
It seems like a lot of it comes from or affects, I don't know which direction, but the rules and the culture. So I don't know if it's the culture of individuality and personal achievement that brought about rules that made it more, optimized to succeed that way, or if a rule like that can change and then just through the act of people being within a system that incentivizes people to work a certain way, if that affects the culture of people and the way that they think about resources like land.
Yeah, I think there's definitely elements of both. Like, I do think the incentives at play shape the culture, and I also think the culture shapes the rules that people put in place that sets that incentive. So it's definitely both. But it's hard to tell which one kicked off the process. But you can like just by analyzing the rules in different societies, like not every society works the way I just described. Like land ownership is very different in different parts of the world. It's common to think about it as the same. Like I think, especially from the American perspective, we tend to think that land works the same way in every country when it really doesn't. Even across Europe, it doesn't work the same way. Like leasehold ownership is very common in certain parts of Europe, where freehold ownership, the kind of ownership that's common in America, is popular in other parts of Europe. But especially thinking about Asia, there's places where effectively the government is the only owner of land, and it's all leased out to people to use it for fixed periods of time. Like that is a very common form of ownership that we don't really do very much in America. We do it in bits and pieces, but where it's kind of how the system works in other places.
Yeah. I love talking about this stuff. I could talk about these macroeconomic things, but I guess we probably should start talking about Panvala and the cool stuff that we're working on there. For Panvala, I'm interested in your original vision for what you hoped Panvala would bring about as a technology for the communities that joined it.
Yeah, so from the beginning, Panvala has always, the initial vision of Panvala was to find a way to redirect value from middlemen to communities. That is, there's so many areas in our society where there's some middleman capturing value that's created by me and you. And the clearest example of that, there's more places than just this one, but the clearest example is with advertising. Businesses that make their money from selling advertisements are selling access to me and you to companies that want more customers in the door. So really, if you think of the profit, advertising companies like Facebook and Google or television networks, whatever you want to think of, their profit comes from us. We make it all. Like we are the source of their money, and it does not go to us. That is strange and unusual. Like it seems like an obvious inefficiency for the value that's coming from me to go to somebody else. So the purpose of Panvala has always been to find ways to redirect that value that gets captured by middlemen to communities. There's a broader economic perspective that's generally called Georgism, after the economist Henry George, who basically saw this problem in land, not necessarily advertising. But like, if you look at the value of urban land, like if you build a building on a piece of land, you're doing something valuable. You should be rewarded for the building that you're building. But the value of the land itself, imagine if you have a vacant lot and the city grows around you, you've made a ton of money without doing any work. And that's really the same sort of capture of value by a middleman. Like the community got richer, and as a result, they have to pay this person who owns a piece of land more money. Like, that doesn't necessarily make sense. Like, and that's what Henry George pointed out in the late 1800s. Is really like, we'd probably all be better off if we directed that value to communities. So really, in general, the ethos, the vision that we see is a world where more of the value that you and I create, that gets captured by middlemen, goes to our communities instead. And that means our communities are going to have vastly more resources to work with. So any community that you're a part of today is just going to get better. That also means that a lot of the problems that we have to rely on centralized things, on monopolies to improve, like government, like a lot of things we're going to be able to do, we're going to be able to solve a lot of problems without having to win an election. That doesn't mean governments are going to go away. It just means that if you have more resources, you can solve more problems without defeating your opponents. You just have the resources to solve the problem on your own. And as a result, lots of people get happier. It also means that there's going to be more reasons for people to be connected to the people in the community. Like the more economic progress we have, the more isolated and atomized we all seem to be. And again, to me, that's really a result of just the pure incentives at play when it's just pure capitalism. And when communities are kind of the bedrock of a large portion of our society's economic resources, instead of just having incentives pull people apart, there's a countervailing force that's pushing people together, not necessarily for everyone to be part of the same thing, but for everyone to find their people, be connected to other people, because to access those resources, you have to be part of a community. So like that's kind of bits and pieces of the world that I see, the world that I kind of desperately want to live in. And that's why the work that I do every day is to build more of that world and make it real.
Nice. Can you talk about the economic system of Panvala and kind of how the Pan token works within that concept?
Sure. So the token is a bootstrapping mechanism. It's a way to kickstart this network of communities that we need to exist. So before I describe how the Pan token itself works, I want to describe how Panvala itself could work without a token at all, because everything that we're doing with Panvala is about people. It's not about a currency. The currency is a tool. It's not the core part of what we do together. So again, what we're trying to do is get value that was going to middlemen to go to communities instead. So using the advertising example, really what we want is businesses to be able to fund communities and have those have customers from those communities patronize those businesses. So in effect, the clearest illustration of how that works is with a program that we're launching next month that we call Panvala Stamps. And Panvala Stamps are basically NFTs that businesses offer to their customers that fund their communities as a reward for doing business with them. So the analog example of this, some people have heard of this program called Box Tops for Education. And it's really a cereal company, General Mills, that wants parents to buy their cereal. There's lots of cereals on the shelves. General Mills wants you to buy General Mills cereals. So they say, if you keep the box top of a General Mills cereal, take it to your kid's school, we will fund your kid's school with our marketing budget instead of using those dollars to buy ads. So that's the same kind of effect that we want for the whole economy. Like when a company wants you to buy their product, to do business with them, they, instead of giving you a cardboard box top, they give you an NFT with the value that it's worth for your community printed on the NFT. And then you get to take that to any community you want to fund. You get to choose, you control where it goes to be able to fund the community you want. So if you think about what's happening there, if you visualize basically this jar that sponsors are putting money in every time they mint one of these stamps. Like if they're trying to mint a $3 stamp, put $3 into the jar, and then there's a $3 stamp that goes to one of their customers. Their customers takes it to the community they care about, and then that community has the right to withdraw the $3 from that jar. That whole system, that whole process can be organized without any crypto, without any token, anything at all. What the PAN token does is allows us to kickstart the system. So again, it's hard to, if without any communities in the network, it's hard to get sponsors to mint stamps. So instead of trying to start from that point, we started with growing a network of communities, starting with 5 communities, and we're at 77 communities today. We want to be thousands of communities. And the way we did that is by saying, hey, the resources that your community gets is not coming from sponsors on day one. It's coming from the token supply on day one. So we've been giving resources to communities for years. That's literally what we do without having sponsors putting something in. Now we're closing that loop and having sponsors putting value in to be able to provide that sustainable flow of value to actually go to those communities. So that's kind of how we kickstarted. When you think about what PAN means in the long term, the rules that we put in place for Panvala are designed to encourage each community to own their share of Panvala. So even as we've been bootstrapping it, the way that we've been allocating the Panvala's resources is by first seeing how large a community is, how many people are in it, how much the community members donate, etc., and basically setting a cap on how much each community can stake and earn from Panvala. And then encouraging communities to stake by saying, hey, the more you stake until you reach your cap, the more you stake, the more you get from Panvala. So really, we've always been trying to encourage communities to own their share of Panvala, either in the community shared treasury or as individual members of the community who just say, I want my holdings to support this particular community. That's the way we've been allocating resources. That's the way we will continue to allocate resources. Because again, it's not meant, the token isn't meant, like in a lot of systems, it's like, oh, hold this token because there's some fees from this decentralized platform that somehow benefit the token holders. And that's not how this works at all. All the benefits go to the communities in the network. That is how we work. But as we bootstrap it, basically the resources that we have go to the communities that own the network. And as our surplus, as the amount that's coming out of the inflation goes down because there's a cap to the token supply, the common needs of the network, instead of purely being funded by inflation, will be funded by the communities that don't own their share. So basically, you can think about 2 phases of Panvala. One where there's a surplus, which we're in today and probably will be for 5 to 10 more years, where the surplus gets divided between the communities at stake. And then a phase where not in surplus anymore, and instead the network needs to pay for its operating costs. And in that case, the communities that will be contributing to that are the communities that don't own their share will contribute more than the communities that do own their share. So the long-term use for PAN is kind of as a tax exemption, so to speak, for your community's share of what it takes to run the network.
It's kind of, I'm just thinking of it now, kind of like Bitcoin, where Bitcoin is, I guess you could call it the surplus phase of Bitcoin, where there's this mining reward for people who are mining transactions. And then on top of that, there's transaction fees. So if you want a transaction to go through, then that's the amount that you pay to get your transaction to be prioritized. For Panvala, it feels maybe like this period of inflation, you have minor rewards that are going to the communities that are a part of the Panvala League. And then transaction fees are more like what businesses are paying to the communities. And the value getting created out of that is the ability for the community members who are paying for services and products from those businesses to have influence over where those transaction fees go.
Yes, that's a very good comparison, and it's almost completely accurate. So you can feel free to use that comparison and use that as the way you think about it. But there's one key difference that sets it apart. So in Bitcoin, the transaction fees go to the miners, and there's no way to basically put more value back into Bitcoin itself to be able to continue distributing Bitcoin as the whole protocol. Like the Bitcoin's just going to run out of Bitcoins and it's going to stop. But in Panvala, when a sponsor wants to mint a stamp, they're going to mint a $3 stamp, so they put $3 back into the token supply, that the $3 that they put in is governed by the same rules as the initial token supply. That is, the half-life of 4 years that's been in the release of the whole token supply since day one applies to every new contribution of funds to Panvala itself. So it's best to think of Panvala as kind of a flow of value, and then the countervailing flow of value is what the sponsors are putting back in. So there's this kind of this back pressure that the flow of money from sponsors puts on the system. So eventually, the pressure of tokens coming out as inflation will kind of be equal to the pressure of tokens going in as to mint stamps for sponsors. Right now, the pressure is just all the tokens coming out. And as we ramp up the stamp campaigns, then there'll be that back pressure. And eventually, they'll reach some sort of equilibrium. So that's kind of the difference from the Bitcoin model. We're not purely trying to distribute a token. What we're trying to do is organize a flow of value to communities. So that change is what makes it easier for this whole system to reason about the flow of value to communities versus the flow of value from sponsors.
When I first heard about this collective passport and these Panvala stamps, the thing that got me most excited was, as a OneHive contributor who's spending a lot of time with gardens, our whole platform, the idea behind it is creating token economies for communities that are building public goods. And the key challenge that we are addressing at this point, in this extremely young point of this entire concept, is the old word business models, but I think that's like already outdated for use in this context. But businesses have revenue and expenses, and for token economies that are supporting public goods, there needs to be this sort of model that supports the price of the token and basically makes these systems sustainable in a way that you can be confident investing and contributing to these communities and getting paid in these tokens. And the early way that seems like it's working the best for public good community funding is something that works kind of similar to leveraged donations, where it's kind of donation based because people are giving their money to communities, but we have these systems where your donation gets leveraged through some system. And Gitcoin and Giveth are two good examples of that, because Gitcoin has a matching pool of funds that are distributed through Dratic funding. And so when you donate $1 to a community, it actually becomes more than $1 through that system. And Giveth is the system is that when you donate $1 to a community, you get streamed Give tokens over time and gain governance in the Giveth economy and earn value that way. And so Panvala immediately made sense as another form of sort of leveraged donations, except for it's not a donation, it's companies that are paying real money to get real value, and people who want to support communities being able to decide where the value that those companies are paying for goes. And I was super excited just through this concept of having a value flow system that is like one step beyond leveraged donations, where it's a sustainable way of basically moving value from private goods to public goods. And that's just kind of the context that got me excited about this. I personally, I've been paying attention to Panvala for a long time, but it was hearing about this collective action passport that first got me really excited and became more involved with helping out at Panvala.
I'm glad I did the trick. It's very hard to get the whole Panvala vision in people's heads, especially as we've been building it up. Like I remember in the early days trying to explain the whole thing to people and seeing just confused looks on people's face. So instead of focusing on getting the whole vision in people's heads, getting enough of the vision to get the next step built is kind of the approach that we've been taking from 2020 onward. And that was really growing the network of communities. Like, we need communities to be able to come together, to be able to do anything else Panvala is trying to do. So rather than focus on, how are we going to get value from sponsors, et cetera, we literally did not talk about that at all. All we said is like, hey, we were trying to bring these communities together. There's this treasury that we share, but it's really just about social connection between communities, building tighter social bonds, helping the communities cooperate. That's really the narrative that we told, and that's what worked to get people to come together. So now that we have enough communities to be able to execute more of the vision, now I get to talk about more of the vision, because instead of it being hard, like, again, trying to tell you, like I literally tried to explain Panvala Stamps in 2019. We did an experiment with NFTs at ETHCC in Paris, and also I think at ETH Denver that year. And it just, like, nobody got it. Like saying, you think that businesses are going to pay for these NFTs that fund communities to be able to get them to come in the door? Like, it just did not fit. And we literally did it. Like, I have the pamphlet, I have the PDF that we gave out to show people, like, this is what we're trying to do. But now, when there's actually communities in the network, and especially now that there's more people collecting NFTs than there were in 2019, more of it resonates. So now it's much easier. Like, it just fits in people's heads. There is even more to the vision than I've been able to explain to you so far. Like, it's just so, like, there's an entire world in my head that operates on the general principle that the value that gets captured by other people in our economy, that's being created by you, gets controlled by you to take to the community you want. And that's such a big thing, but I can only show it step by step. But it's like, I think it's the path to getting us out of so many of the problems that we face as a society today. I think lots of people are unhappy with the way the world is going, and they're unhappy for dramatically different reasons. Nobody agrees on why things are going wrong, but people feel that things are going wrong. If we just had a vote on that, we would have dramatic consensus that things are going the wrong way. I think the reason for that is because our society has become so rigid. Like, the more progress, the more economic progress we have, the harder it ends up being to for anybody to have agency to actually make their vision of the world more real. Because instead, our government gets bigger and bigger and solves more and more problems. But then if you want to get it to solve your own problem, you need 51% of everyone in the country to agree with you, and that's very difficult. So especially with the rise of the internet and more people being able to connect with each other and have reach agreement on their own worldviews, they get even more frustrated because they're like, I talk to all these people that agree with me on Twitter every day, but nothing that we agree on gets executed in real life because we cannot win an election. What I think we need is to eliminate the requirement to win an election. I want the value that you create in our economy to follow you wherever you want to take it, even if it's something I disagree with. Like, as long as you're not imposing something on other people, if there's a way you want to live with you and your community and you need more resources to make it happen, I hope that Panvala Stamps can empower you to create your vision of a better world and a better life within your own community. So you don't have to win an election anymore. You can get your way with your slice of our collective resources. That's what I want for everybody, because I believe that's how we get out of this trap. We can make people happier, and then some people are actually going to have good ideas about different ways we should do things. Ideas I wouldn't have come up with, ideas I might have actually disagreed with. But since people actually get to go out and do them, play out their experiments, when some of those succeed, I'll be able to say, oh, I was wrong about that. Now my community is going to copy what your community is doing because it works. Like, we don't have that outlet as a society right now. It's trapping us, making people unhappy. It's giving us dramatically large problems that we don't think we can solve, like climate change. I think we're going to solve every problem that faces us because that's what human beings do. We solve problems. But the system that we're all stuck in together is preventing us from solving those problems. We need an outlet, and I think this.
The way that life has worked all the way up until this point is that we have just the living beings are a great example of how diversity and sort of localized progress can work in a broader context of an ecosystem where there's not necessarily something at the top that's making decisions for everyone underneath that, but individual groups making decisions that works for them and finding niches and competitive advantages and finding ways to work with other groups within that same ecosystem. It feels like it just naturally works. And yeah, I really think that kind of the problem that you're talking about is that we're trying to put an ecosystem like that under a an umbrella that's supposed to bundle all of humanity under sort of one set of rules, and it's holding us back more than it's helping us.
Exactly that. The two problems that I see everywhere in our society are monopolies and rent seeking. And monopolies aren't just, it's not just about economic monopolies, it's also about government. Like, governments are monopolies by design. And again, I'm not trying to get rid of government. Governments are great. They continue to exist in the world in my head. But like the using the government to solve all the problems is causing so many more problems because it's a monopoly. Like it stomps out the possibility for new life. That's what monopolies do. So we need to keep the government around, but we need to find ways to solve problems without it so we can actually find new ways to get things done. Monopolies are a huge problem. The second problem, rent seeking. Everybody wants money for nothing. That's what humans do. It's totally natural. We've allowed it to become part of kind of the bedrock of our economy. Like the fairy tale version of capitalism that we tell, where people are coming up with new goods and services to offer more efficiently for people to make them happier, is true in very small corners of our economy. But in the very large portions of our economy, what's happening is pure rent seeking. The tech giants, the largest companies in the world, are predominantly rent seeking companies. Again, they sell your attention and my attention to the highest bidder. Their money does not come from work. Their money comes from selling our eyeballs, from controlling us, from building moats. Every venture capitalist in Silicon Valley will tell you, like, if you're trying to start a business, like, what's your moat? What's the way that you're going to prevent people from choosing another option? Like, that's the advice that we give. And it's good advice, it works. But that we've made that how our society works. That's terrible. Why are we doing this? We can normalize rent-seeking behavior and make it the way our society works. It makes people go to work every day, find new ways to exploit their peers, and pocket more money as a result, and just call it normal. We come up with stories to tell about how we're making a better world. Like Facebook, for instance, like if you talk to early Facebook employees, like a lot of what they were saying is how they're connecting more people, like helping them communicate with one another. We come up with these narratives we tell people about how we're doing good while we are maximizing what we can extract from one another. It's for lack of a better term, unholy, and we have to stop it. Between monopolies and rent seeking, if we can crack both of those problems by giving people more access to the resources, to the value they create in our economy, and letting them choose, the thing that monopolies don't let you do is choose. We need to make sure people can choose where those resources go. With that lever, I believe we can make so many people happier and we can get out of the trap that we all know we're in as a society.
Nice. Hell yes. What can you share about the current state of Panvala Stamps and the progress as it is now?
Yeah, so there's a couple of campaigns that are going to be going in in May rather, where you and everybody else in your community are going to be able to collect stamps that fund your community. Again, these stamps are NFTs. So you're going to go out there, you're going to collect these NFTs that show up in your wallet, and unlike every other NFT out there, you're going to be able to redeem these for money that funds your community. These aren't speculative. It's not that you're like, oh, these are so scarce and other people are going to buy this from me. Nobody's going to buy these stamps from me. Like, that's not the point. The stamps have been funded with money from sponsors. So you go and collect the stamps and you redeem them to fund the community of your choice. When you do this, you're going to be doing something that the business finds valuable. Maybe you're going to be signing up for their newsletter, subscribing to their YouTube channel. Maybe you're going to be becoming their customer, making a purchase with their business. And as a result, they're going to give you a stamp that funds your community. They're going to take the marketing budget that they were going to take and spend on Facebook ads or Google ads. And instead, they're going to put that money directly into the budget of your community. And when I say your community, that means your DAO. That means your social club that talks about crypto all the time. But even beyond crypto, that means your parent-teacher association. That means your HOA. It means your club. It means your church. It means your recreational sports team. Like, it means literally whatever group of people you come together with to do the thing you like. When you do the thing you like with the people you like, we want to drive more resources in that direction. Because again, that's what's going to make people happier. That's what's going to get us out of this trap. And again, that's what's going to get the value that's currently being sucked up by these giant monopolies. That's what's going to get that value unlocked and be able to spend in the direction that you care about. Maybe you just want to throw better parties with the people you like. That's totally legitimate. We want to fund that. Either some sort of cause you care about and you want more resources to go to make that cause better. We want to help you do that too. We think that the solution to things like climate change, to things like crippling debt from trying to get educated, things like absurdly expensive housing that makes our cities impossible for normal people to afford, we think the solution to all those problems lies in unlocking this value that already comes from you and giving you the ability to control it. You don't have to win an election to solve these problems. You get to choose where the dollars go. And I think most of these problems are problems that individual people want to solve and are willing to use their resources to do it. We just have to give them the ability to make that happen. That's what these stamps are. We need to get you to go out and collect them and then take them to the communities that are making progress on the things you care about, whether it's a cause, whether it's a community, whether it's a party. Like, we want to give you the resources to solve your problems.
Nice. And there's some customers that have bought stamps already, right? And is there a process if you are a company or with a product or service and you want stamps? How does that work?
Yeah, the stamps are already in the process of being minted. Some of the payments have already been received on chain back into Panvala's token supply. So if you are a sleuth, you can probably track that down and see what's going on there. Basically, if you're interested in sponsoring a series of Panvala stamps, we want to work with you to make that happen. And again, we believe it is a more effective way to market than anything else you're spending money on. The reason is that literally every community has a reason to promote what you're giving out the stamps for. Like, nobody's out there promoting your ads. And even if you're directly giving money to your customers the way that Coinbase does, nobody's promoting that. Nobody's saying, go sign up for Coinbase so you can get your $5. That's literally a thing that they offer, but nobody's promoting it because nobody has a reason to. If Coinbase picked up $5 and said, hey, we're going to issue a Panvala stamp, and instead of the money going to you when you sign up for a Coinbase account, that money is going to go to your community, then literally every Discord you're in will be full of people saying, make sure you go get that Coinbase stamp. It will fund our community, collect it, and redeem it with us. So if you're interested in trying out this new form of marketing, we want to work with you to make that happen. You're going to get your own custom stamped NFT with the art from your community, your company's logo on it, that people will be able to collect for completing an action that you choose that's valuable to your business, whether it's making a purchase, signing up for an account, signing up for a newsletter, whatever it is that you want to get people to do. Stamps are the right way to incentivize people to get it done. It's the right way to spend your marketing budget, and it's the right way to change the world.
When do you expect that people will be able to start collecting stamps?
So it's going to be May once these first campaigns start. Early May is when we want people to be able to collect these, and they will start showing up in people's wallets.
Nice. My background pre-crypto Web3 was in marketing, and it took a long time in this space to understand anything. But even marketing, my supposed expertise, everything I had known was kind of thrown out the window just because of like everything works so differently here. And this marketing concept is, I think it's a very Web3 native way of getting the attention of people, because what's going to happen is you're going to have communities that are able to benefit from stamps that will be very interested in their community members knowing about these products and services that they can use to direct money into the community. And so you basically have free, although not free because these companies are buying stamps, but you have communities that are very motivated to share with each other the products and services that they should be using, because if they use them, they'll be able to support the community that they all care about. And the in this space where we need to be thinking of innovative new ways of getting the word out about things, I think that's a really ingenious system that if you're in marketing, if you're at a company that's looking at cost per click on Google Ads for most cryptocurrency keywords and balking, and looking at email newsletter, any huge crypto email newsletter for any type of crypto audience that's getting FTX and these really large crypto companies with bottomless bank accounts to spend absurd money on them, they don't have a lot of routes. And that's like especially hitting the small communities of crypto. And it's a very good, I think, first kind of innovative system that is more accessible for those types of communities.
Yeah, I definitely think it's the way forward, both as a better way of marketing, but really, again, like I think so much of what we do as a society gets transformed by this way of funding things. Like literally, if I didn't believe that it was possible to make this happen through, collective action by people just opting into this way of doing things, the way I think is relatively straightforward, then I like basically if I wasn't doing the job I'm doing today, I'd be convincing politicians to do this for me. Like literally, if think about how terrible the politics are in so many different places right now, and how if you ran on a campaign of saying, "Hey, we're going to connect your community with resources to do more of the stuff you want to do without having to get everybody to agree," like that is a winning campaign anywhere. But nobody knows that they can do that. Nobody sees the potential of just like opting out of a competitive mind frame instead of saying what every politician says, hey, we're going to make the change that you want to see and we're going to defeat those opponents who want bad things. Instead of saying that, they can just say, we're going to help everybody get as much of what they want as possible. Like, it's just, it's to me, it's such a no-brainer. Like, we're just doing things so profoundly wrong. And the way to get back on the right track is to give people control over both the flow of advertising dollars in our economy, but also the flow of other kinds of things that are extracted from me and you, whether it's like the rent you're paying to your landlord, or maybe it's like there's some sort of monopoly that you're paying money to every month because they're the only option that provides the service you want. Maybe we shouldn't be rewarding people for rent seeking anymore. And maybe we should redirect that value to help more people get what they want.
How do you see the relationship between communities that are leveraging their own resources with the political system that it's trying to improve on? I guess both like how the political system views it and how the people view the political system.
Yeah, so in the ideal world in my head, the relationship between people choosing where resources go and having more resources go to their communities and the political system is that we begin to solve more problems within our own communities. That is, let's say you want a more effective healthcare system. Maybe your community has enough resources to solve the problem that you're facing. Maybe you want better schools. Maybe your community has the resources to provide better schools. Like the more resources we can direct to communities, the more communities will compete by providing solutions to the problems that people face. As more and more problems get solved, maybe people decide, hey, maybe we don't need to be directing so much money to governments anymore. So it's not about like getting rid of government, it's just about solving so many problems that we can shrink it. And not in the libertarian sense where like people are just like, oh, just shrink the government, have the government do less and replace it with nothing. Instead, it's like literally solve as many problems as you can without government so then you can shrink it.
Yeah, I saw a tweet today from Lauren. I forget who she was interviewing, but it was a woman who was trying to persuade people in cryptocurrency to not bash politicians so much because the they're still working within the same system, and if you want to get stuff done, then it's probably not a good idea to just lambaste the people who are making the regulations that do affect what people are doing. I feel like people maybe underestimate how positive the influence of regulation has been so far. I personally was not really optimistic about cryptocurrency until I saw Jay Clayton, the SEC commissioner, at a Senate hearing, and they were asking him about ICOs, and it was 2018, right in the peak scam ICO phase, and they were asking him about how the SEC is regulating these projects, and he said, well, most of the stuff that we're seeing, most of these ICOs uh, from the Ethereum network, because they were mostly Ethereum tokens at that point. We've looked at them and we think that they look like securities. And to the extent that they are securities, we're going to regulate them with the rules that we have. And they asked him about Bitcoin, and he said, yeah, we've looked at Bitcoin, and our opinion is that those don't look like securities. So we're not going to regulate them like securities. And I thought that was such a great response to this kind of absurd new technology that I think most people assumed the worst when they thought of how the SEC would handle cryptocurrency, but I feel like they did a really good job of looking at this brand new technology and looking at their rules and trying to apply the rules in the way that they should. And I feel like we want to promote that for as long as possible, that for as long as we can have a government that's trying to help prevent people from getting hurt by these systems, that we should help them do that as best that they can until hopefully one day we do have a system that makes that unnecessary, but we're definitely not there yet.
Yeah, I think things could have gone so much worse when it comes to regulation that this is where we're at is kind of fine. Like, of course, it could always be better, but where we're at is kind of fine. Like, I remember when I was using like crypto as like an actual currency, buying tacos at food trucks, and then seeing the tax implications of all that. And like, the the government's ruining everything. But again, like when it comes to building stuff, the fact that there's still a lot of people building innovative stuff in the United States without having to flee to Singapore or somewhere else to get stuff done, like I think it's pretty good. And there's still lots of people who are getting scammed, lots of people who are losing lots of money because of a lack of consumer protections. So, like the problems that regulators are trying to solve are real. I hope they find ways to solve them without, stamping out innovation. But again, like regardless of what people think about government in general, like this is the United States of America. Like we have a pretty good economy because the regulators have done a decent job of letting economic activity thrive here, historically speaking. So I don't think they're trying to end that streak.
Yeah. Okay, we're coming right up on an hour right now. One other thing I wanted to ask was for anyone who's in a community that they think might be interested in joining the Panvala League and becoming, able to start getting Panvala stamps and funding through that. What's the way that they can do that?
Yeah, so we want your community to join Panvala, whatever kind of community it is. Like, if it's people who like each other coming together to do the thing they like, we want to support that. So the way you join is by going to join.panvala.com. And that lets you schedule a short call with our membership community so we can get to know more about you and you can get to know more about Panvala. The communities who are already in Panvala are the ones who approve or reject new communities. We go through that process every single time. It's not intended to be exclusive. Like, we haven't actually rejected anybody yet. The reason we go through that process is because we are trying to build a network of communities that work together. And eventually communities are going to try to join that are bad at working with other communities. Communities that people might find objectionable, etc. And the way we're going to say no to those people isn't by me saying no or by some core team saying no. It's literally the existing communities in the network are going to say, we don't want to work with that community, so they're not in the network. Or an existing communities in the network that we want to leave the network. That sort of thing is controlled by the member community. So we want you to join. It's not exclusive. The vision is literally a community in our society working together to drive more resources away from middlemen and towards community life, so people can choose how they want to deploy our shared resources in our society and solve problems for themselves, make their lives richer, make their communities thrive, solve the problems that they see, and to enable that for all humans. So we want your community to be part of this network, and we're looking forward to working with you to make this happen.
Yeah, it's lots of potential upside and zero cost. I don't see any reason why anyone would not take the time to say that they'd like to join.
I think you're right. Yeah, there's all upside, no cost. Just yeah, good idea.
All right, thanks a lot, Niran. This has been a lot of fun.
Thanks, Paul. Great talking to you. And as always, I love the One Hive community and what y'all are doing with gardens. Looking forward to seeing y'all thrive.
Nice. Thanks. All right. Have a good one.